good morning and welcome back to the Shores Church. We're in week 2 of our new series, Paparazzi. We're going through the book of James and we're really looking at the idea of how do we live out our faith where an entire world is watching us. So last week we were looking through James chapter 1 and we hit on two main ideas. The first idea was this, is that the testing of our faith, that we talked about going through trials of many kinds. And as we go through trials, our faith is built. And as our faith is built, we wind up on the other side of that trial lacking nothing. And that if we need wisdom in that process, that we can seek God and God will give us wisdom to help us get through that trial, get to the other side, to have our faith strengthened. And it's an entire process that God is right there with us on. The second point was the idea of hearing and doing the word. Hearing and doing that. It's not enough to just hear something, but we need to then act upon it so that it's not just information, but it becomes transformational in our life so that we're able to then go and do what God has called us to do. Now, today we're going to be going through James chapter 2. We'll be reading through that text together, and we're going to be talking the idea of not showing partiality towards people and how our faith without works is dead. So we're going to talk about those two ideas. But before we do, would you repeat after me this morning? Your word is written in my mind. Your word is hidden in my heart. Your word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. I will seek you with all of my strength. I choose to live my life according to your word. Your word, O Lord, is eternal. Well, let's go ahead this morning. We're going to jump right into James chapter 2 and read verses 1 through 13. So would you read with me this morning? My brothers, show no partiality as you hold the faith in our Lord Jesus Christ, the Lord of glory. For if a man wearing a gold ring and fine clothing comes into your assembly, and a poor man in shabby clothing also comes in, and if you pay attention to the one who wears the fine clothing and say, you sit here in a good place, while you say to the poor man, you stand over there, or sit down at my feet, have you not made the distinctions among yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts? Listen, my beloved brothers, has not God chosen those who are poor in the world to be rich in faith and heirs of the kingdom, which he has promised to those who love him? But you have dishonored the poor man. Are not the rich the ones who oppose you and the ones who drag you into courts? Are they not the ones who blaspheme the honorable name by which you were called? If you really fulfill the royal law according to the scripture, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. You are doing well. But if you show partiality, you are committing sin and are convicted by the law as transgressors. For whoever keeps the whole law but fails in one point has become guilty of all of it. For he who said, do not commit adultery, also said, do not murder. If you do not commit adultery but do murder, you have become a transgressor of the law. So speak and so act as those who are to be judged under the law of liberty. For judgment is without mercy to one who has shown no mercy. Mercy triumphs over judgment. The first idea that we're pulling out of the second chapter of James today is the sin of partiality. The sin of partiality. That partiality means that you're looking with an unfair bias towards something or someone. And there's moments where being partial is not a bad thing. If you're going on vacation, it's okay to be partial to a vacation destination that you like. That if you don't like going to the beach, but you love going on an amusement park ride, it makes sense to be partial to the amusement park. If you love the beach, but you don't like thrills, going to the beach, it's okay to be partial towards that location. You may be partial towards certain types of foods. You might be partial to certain restaurants. You might be partial to all sorts of different things. And that's okay. But the problem is when we begin to be partial towards other people over someone else, as we saw in this passage. So the first idea that we're going to pull out of the partiality of sin is being partial towards others. We're going to focus on partiality towards others. Really, the idea that I want you to realize is that when we look at somebody with more value than somebody else, simply because what that person can do for us, that's when we start serving man instead of serving God. Now, here's the thing we need to realize with God is capable of doing anything and everything that he says he can. When we start approaching the idea of life of saying, I'm going to serve this person has more wealth, this person has more ability, they have more resources, we need to do what this person wants. This person over here is poor, they don't have a whole lot. And we show more favor to the rich person than to the poor. The danger of that is we're saying this person is more valuable than this person because they can do more for me. Here's the thing we got to remember. Money in the kingdom of God is not a big deal. We serve a God who owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. If God owns the cattle, if God owns the world, if God is the creator and the author of the universe, he can move money around as he sees fit based off of what you're accomplishing for the kingdom. I don't need to come to this person over here and say, oh, you have a lot of money. Let me try to please you. If anything, I'm going to do all the more of preaching and teaching the truth and saying, yes, you have a lot of money here. You have a lot of resources. You can do a lot of good. But are you listening to God? Are you seeking what God is wanting you to do? I'm not going to appease that individual simply because they have more resources than this person over here. That they may be in poverty, but they might be able to serve in a way that that individual will never be able to serve. When we look at things and saying, okay, you might have some financial resources, but you have some time resources, you have some giftings and talents and abilities that the rich individual doesn't have. And all of that is needed in order to advance the kingdom. And when all I do is pay attention to this person, I neglect them. And on the surface level, we hope that the only thing that we'd be missing is some time, talent, abilities in the church. But in reality, if all I'm doing is trying to reach the rich person, then the poor person may never experience the love and grace of Jesus Christ. Both are needed. When we are partial to individuals simply because of their financial status, we don't minister to everybody, but it doesn't stop there. When we're partial to only people who look like us, then that means that there's individuals who are not hearing the gospel simply because they don't look like us, they don't talk like us, they don't have the right lingo, they don't have the right background. And that even goes to denominational breakdowns as well, saying that, well, this person's invited into our church because they're from the Assemblies of God, but this person's not because they grew up Baptist. No, the church is the church. Now, we have a certain theology, we have a certain belief structure, we have 16 fundamental truths. If you want to know them, go to my shores.church, go to theShoresChurch.org, go to one of our websites, and you can find those of what we believe. But here's the thing I need you to realize, that at the end of the day, the church building is open for whoever would come in who wants to experience Jesus Christ, because we value every person. We value them experiencing Jesus Christ. We value the intentional discipleship of them so that they become a joyful, generous person and they can join our common unity. I don't care where they are in their walk with Jesus Christ, whether they're rich, whether they're poor, whether they're black, whether they're white, whatever. I don't care if they're in sin, if they're walking out of their sin, whether you would call them a saint, whatever you would call them. I'm not going to show partiality to any one person over another simply because Scripture calls me not to. Scripture calls me to look at each and every person in the image of God, that they have a piece of God that we don't have as individuals, and that when we invite them into our fellowship, into our common unity, then all of a sudden they can bring something to the table that we didn't have before. That now all of a sudden we can experience this, and the church is better for it because we're pouring into them. We're helping them go from a spot of not knowing God to knowing God, and that their time, talent, ability, resources, as they become joyfully generous, they start giving of themselves. The church advances because we are not being partial to what somebody looks like, how they talk, what they have. And we say that each person is valuable because God values every person, and we value every person because God values every person. Now, it takes another step, though, that it's not just partiality towards others. That's not the only sin that comes into play here. The other partiality is partiality towards myself. Now, you might be wondering, well, how can I be partial towards myself? The idea of either, one, you think of yourself way too highly, but I think the other part, and this is what I want to focus on, is you think of yourself way too less, and you don't think highly enough of yourself when you were created in the image of God. Now, I want you to take a moment and watch this video from the Dove Beauty Sketches. It's going to be a little eye-opening for you. So go ahead and take a moment and watch this clip.
I'm a forensic artist. Worked for the San Jose Police Department from 1995 to 2011.
I showed up to a place I'd never been, and there was a guy with a drafting board.
We couldn't see them, they couldn't see us.
Tell me about your hair.
I didn't know what he was doing, but then I could tell after several questions that he was drawing me.
Tell me about your chin.
It kind of protrudes a little bit, especially when I smile.
Your jaw.
My mom told me I had a big jaw.
What would be your most prominent feature?
I kind of have a fat, rounder face.
The older I've gotten, the more freckles I've gotten.
I would say I have a pretty big forehead.
Once I get a sketch, I say thank you very much, and then they leave. I don't see them.
All I had been told before the sketch was to get friendly with this other woman, Chloe.
Today I'm gonna ask you some questions about a person you met earlier, and I'm gonna ask you some general questions about their face.
She was thin, so you could see her cheekbones. And her chin, it was a nice, thin chin.
She had nice eyes. They lit up when she spoke.
Cute nose.
She had blue eyes, very nice blue eyes.
So here we are. This is the sketch that you helped me create, and that's a sketch that somebody described of you.
So yeah, that's...
She looks closed off and fatter, sadder too. The second one looks more open, friendly, and happy.
I should be more grateful of my natural beauty. It impacts the choices and the friends that we make, the jobs we apply for, how we treat our children. It impacts everything. It couldn't be more critical to your happiness.
Do you think you're more beautiful than you say?
Yeah. Yeah.
We spend a lot of time as women analyzing and trying to fix the things that aren't quite right. And we should spend more time appreciating the things that we do like.
You see, this idea of the sin of partiality really does go both ways. We need to not be partial towards other people, but we also need to think of ourselves appropriately instead of saying, well, this person's so much better than myself. That when you watch those women as they're describing themselves, they really beat themselves up. They really feature all of their weaknesses, all of the things that they would say, well, this is unattractive, and I don't like this, and I don't like that. They're all created in the image of God. And when somebody else looked at them and spoke life into them, the differences between the two portraits was very, very significant. And if you really paid attention, the video of the other person describing them was much more accurate than the picture that the individual described of themselves. It was a much closer match from the sketch artist. And when we realize this, we're all created in the image of God. You all have talents, you have abilities that God has put into you that He might not have put into me. And we need you as a church to work together so that we're able to accomplish the great commission that Jesus Christ gave to His church, to go out and to make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. We need to do this together. We need to work together. And when you are partial towards other people, we leave people out. But when you are partial towards yourself and say, well, that person, they're just so much better than me. They have more time than me. They have more resources than me. They have more abilities than me. You're doing it likewise. You're, instead of kicking someone else out, you're kicking yourself out. And when you kick yourself out, we all of a sudden lose a little piece of God in our church because you're saying, well, I'm not valuable enough. You were created in the image of God. My God doesn't make junk. My God doesn't make mistakes. We might choose to live in sin and issues that God's got to work us out of. But the thing that you and I have to remember is if you're created in the image of God, there is something in you that God gave to you specifically so that his kingdom could be advanced, and you need to live it out. And when you say, well, all these people, they're just so much better than me. When you have an Eeyore mentality, like, woe is me, that you're going to lose out on what God has called you to do. So let me challenge you. Don't think of one person better than another, but also don't think of all these people better than you. Stay humble, but realize the fact that you were created in the image of God and that God has things that he can do with you, through you, and in you. Now, with that, we're going to go on to our second point. And our second point this morning is faith without works is dead. This is going to be James chapter 2, verses 14 through 26. If you would go ahead and read this with me this morning. What good is it, my brothers, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can that faith save him? If a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to them, go in peace, be warmed and filled, without giving them the things needed for the body, what good is that? So also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. But someone will say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith apart from your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. You believe that God is one, you do well. Even the demons believe and shudder. Do you want to be shown, you foolish person, that faith apart from works is useless? Was not Abraham our father justified by works when he offered up his son Isaac on the altar? You see that faith was active along with his works, and faith was completed by his works. And the scripture was fulfilled that says, Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness, and he was called a friend of God. You see that a person is justified by works and not by faith alone. And in the same way, was not also Rahab the prostitute justified by works when she received the messengers and sent them out by another way? For as the body apart from the spirit is dead, so also faith apart from works is dead. Now, I've got one more video that I want you to watch this morning. It's by the Skit Guys, and it really ties this idea up really well. So I'm going to be back with you in just a moment. Watch this quick video clip.
God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life.
Excuse me, son.
Yeah?
What have you got there?
Got some birds, some wild birds.
Really?
Yeah.
Where'd you get them?
Got them in the field over there. There's a field with wild birds.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't mind my asking, what are you going to do with them?
I want to play games with them.
Games?
Yeah, I like to play games with wild birds, yeah.
What kind of games?
Sometimes I like to poke a stick in there, you know, and they'll be like going, caw, 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 like that, you know. And then sometimes I like to rattle the cage, and they think it's an earthquake, and they love that.
What happens to them after you're done playing games with them?
Usually I feed them to my cat. Yeah, my cat likes wild birds.
I tell you what, I am fond of wild birds.
You are?
Yeah, let me buy them from you.
You want to buy my wild birds?
Yeah.
They're no good for nothing. They can't do no tricks or nothing. And when you open this gate, they're just going to fly away.
How much?
You're serious?
I'm very serious.
$5.
All right.
$10.
Okay.
$20.
They're wild birds.
They're exotic birds.
You found them in a field.
An exotic field.
All right. That's all I got.
See you looking at the cage.
Yeah. What do you got in there?
You know what's in there.
Mankind.
Found them in the garden. The funny thing is, they put themselves in that cage. I had nothing to do with it.
So what's your plans with them?
I'm gonna play games with them.
Games? What kind of games?
All kinds of games. I'm gonna put games into their life that they think is gonna bring them so much pleasure.
Then I'm going to turn the world upside down. I'm going to make right seem wrong and wrong seem right.
And then?
They'll be damned for all eternity.
My father and I, we're very fond of mankind.
I know.
We want them to have access to us. So I'm going to pay for their freedom.
You want these humans?
Yeah.
You know they've promised you everything before. They're going to turn their backs on you.
Some will, and some won't.
You're serious.
Oh, I'm very serious.
It'll cost you your tears.
I know.
Your blood.
Yeah,
It'll cost you your life.
I know.
You're willing to give your life.
I'm willing to give what it takes.
This reminds us about what Jesus did for us on the cross. He picked up that wooden cross and carried it to Mount Calvary because he loved you and me.
Here's how I like to define faith and works and this whole mixture of how this is supposed to balance. Think of the clip you just saw, that we have this bird cage and we have this idea that man is stuck in the cage and that Jesus bought this cage, bought mankind back from Satan. It cost him his life. It cost him everything. So now all of a sudden Jesus has access to his people, and now it's up to his people whether they're going to walk in freedom or not. Imagine Jesus having that bird cage and that you're in that cage and I'm in that cage, and Jesus opens the door. He can't just make us come out. We can choose to stay there, hold on to the bars. We can choose to stay in that cage and sing and dance and put on a show, hoping that Jesus will take us out. But it is a choice. Going back to John 3:16, one of the most popular verses out there that most people have memorized. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish. It wasn't a matter of nobody's going to perish anymore, but you have to believe in Jesus. You have to take that step out of the cage. No amount of singing, dancing, acting, serving works on their own is going to get you out of that cage. It's not going to get you salvation. But when you leave that cage with the door open, all of a sudden a bird leaving a bird cage and now has the ability to fly, to soar, to see everything that's out there. When Jesus purchased you back, the door is opened and all you have to do is walk out. And when you walk out, you can walk and see every good thing that's out there that God has provided for us. We need to be able to walk in that freedom, to walk in the understanding of who Jesus Christ is and what he's done for you. But then this is what gets tied back. That if you were to just walk out and believe and like, wow, God's awesome, but then not do what he's called you to do, that's faith without works. And faith without works is dead. Because when we look at it, verse 19 told us that you believe that God is one, you do well. Even the demons believe and shudder. The demons believe that Jesus is the Son of God. So it's different. You have to not just only believe, but then you begin to act. You begin to serve. You begin to tell people about Jesus. You begin to serve in the church. You begin doing things that will advance the kingdom and get more people to leave the cage. The problem with humanity is so many people are in that cage. Some of them know they're in the cage and are trying to prove themselves to God. And some have no idea that they're in the cage because they've been stuck there for so long. And it's our job, now that we've experienced freedom and everything that's out there, to then come back to the cage, to come back into proximity with people who need to leave the cage, who need proximity to Jesus, who need to hear the good news, who need to hear the gospel message, and convince them to leave the cage, to come out and see everything that Jesus has done for them. It's up to you to do that. It's up to me to do that, to leave the cage, experience freedom, and come back as close as we can to the cage and get more people out so they can experience every good thing that God has for them. You see, if you really wanted to find faith, it's the idea that salvation, the belief in what Jesus did for us, plus our works. If we want to have faith, we need to have salvation, which we cannot do, that God has given that to us through Jesus Christ's death on the cross and his resurrection, plus our works. So you can't earn the salvation, but your faith is your salvation plus your works. And your works are not to make yourself right with God, but it's because God has made you right and you have such a desire and a passion that you want to give back. You want to serve God because of what he's done for you. So you then go back and try and win more people to Christ because you know how great the freedom is that God has given to you. So this morning, as we go to close, I want to pray over these two main ideas: that we don't show partiality towards people, and that we will realize that we need to have our faith in what is salvation, but we need to have our faith in what our works is, based off of we need to go back and do good things because of what God has done for us. So this morning, I want to pray both of these over your life. I want you to experience the fact that every single person that you run in contact with on a day-to-day basis, whether it's someone you see in the grocery store, whether it's someone you see at work, someone you see on a walk in your neighborhood, or the very someone you see when you look in a mirror, that each and every individual is created in the image of God, and you should not value any as greater than another, because we all share a piece of the Almighty God of the universe. And each one of us has value, and that God desires that none of us shall perish, but that all of us shall have eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord. So that we realize that we need to go after everybody. Everybody needs a seat at the table because Jesus wants to invite us all. So I want to pray that over you, and I want to pray that over me, because there's even moments where I'm not perfect, and all of a sudden I realize I'm not treating everybody the exact same. And I need to grow in that area, and I know you need to grow in that area. And then that second thing with faith without works is that I want to pray over you that you find the right balance in this, because there's too many people, too many Christians that are trying to earn their way into heaven, and you can't do that. But then at the same time, there's too many people that would say, I believe in Jesus Christ and he did everything for me. Now I'm just going to sit here and not do anything because works doesn't get me into heaven. It's a balance. Salvation plus our works equals our faith, and our faith is what gets us to heaven. So I want to pray all this over you this morning, all right? Here we go. Heavenly Father, I thank you for my friends as they watch this morning. Lord, I pray that you would just speak into their hearts, speak into their life, allow them to realize that you are God and that you are good. Lord, I pray that each one of us, whether it's directed at other people or it's directed at ourselves, Lord, that we are not partial, that we are not elevating one person over another, but that we would realize that in your eyes, all of us are equal, that all of us were created in the image of God, that all of us have time, talent, and ability that you have given and entrusted to us, that we would value what every person can bring to the table, because each person that comes to the table and has a relationship with you is somebody who can advance the gospel of Jesus Christ. They can advance your kingdom. So Lord, let us not look at anybody as valuable or not valuable. We look at everyone as made in the image of God with abilities that we want to have be a part of our local body, be a part of the Shores Church. And Lord, I pray right now that you would help us find that right balance between faith and works, salvation and works, Lord, that we would realize that it's not something I can earn. There's literally nothing I can do to earn salvation, but it is given freely. And as I receive that out of the excitement and the love that comes from that we would then want to work and we would want to serve you so that we can advance your kingdom, that we would go back to the cage so that we can invite more people to come out, realizing that they're already been granted freedom, that they can walk in the freedom that you have for them if they would simply come out. So Lord, that you would give us that ability and desire to serve you in a way that we have never done before, simply because you are so good to us, God. Lord, help us find balance so that our faith is alive because we have salvation, and we have works because we love you. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, I want to go ahead and close this message by doing the Great Commission as we always do. Make sure you read chapter 3 of James for next week so you're ready, and I will see you next time. So let's say the Great Commission. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you, and behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. Have a blessed week. I'll see you next time for James chapter 3.